First of all, welcome and thank you for coming. We look forward to the discussion today, which we hope you'll find thought-provoking and as much fun for you to participate in as it was for us to put together. Not all fun, not all the time, but we did have a lot of fun, actually. Our objective in putting this conference on is to shake up and, however slightly, reshape how we think about solving the nation's retirement problems. We intend to cover ground and concepts that generally haven't been addressed in other retirement conferences. This is, in short, not intended to be your father's pension conference. Before we start, thanks are in order to many, many people. First of all, to Senators Harkin and Enzi, and especially to Michael Krebs and Greg Dean of the Help Committee staff for making the meeting here in this room today possible. To Phyllis, Mark, and Josh from Treasury, Labor, and the Pension Benefit Guarantee Corporation for taking time out of their busy schedules to join us today. To all our presenters and panelists. And finally, to our co-sponsors, Gene Sterling at the Urban Institute, and Karen Ferguson, Karen Friedman, Norm, there we go, Norm Stein at the Pension Rights Center, who've truly been exceptional to work with. A lot of people say this is a very unusual alliance among the Pension Rights Center and probably the premier employee advocate organization in the retirement area, the Urban Institute, a eminent Washington think tank, and Covington and Covington and Burling, a law firm that represents big companies. We could all tell you a more detailed story about how we came together to do this, but the bottom line is that we all care deeply about where our nation's retirement system is headed and what that means for all of us who depend on it. Most Americans will spend a quarter of their lives in retirement. How well we do our jobs, all of us here in this room, will help determine how well they live in that last quarter of their lives. This conference is built around one large concept and three smaller concepts. The large concept is that we have fallen into a trap of our own making. It is a mental trap that limits our thinking about how to solve retirement problems. We assume that as our retirement system shifts from one dominated by traditional defined benefit pension plans to one dominated by 401k-like defined contribution plans, defined benefit pension plans have become irrelevant to solving the nation's retirement problems, so that we have no choice but to rely for solutions on defined contribution plans because they are inevitably the wave of the future. Focusing on improving defined contribution plans is very important because individuals, if they have any retirement plan at all, are most likely to be in a 401k or similar defined contribution plan. Still, it is a mistake to rely exclusively on defined contribution plans to solve our retirement problems. First, just because traditional defined benefit plans are in decline does not mean that there aren't more innovative defined benefit plan designs that might prove more sustainable. Second, because of their greater flexibility, defined benefit plans often provide the most efficient solution to any given retirement problem. And third, in a world of increasingly scarce retirement dollars, we cannot afford to ignore a whole class of plans that offer a way to optimize how those dollars are deployed. We've got a very aggressive agenda today, given the time we have and the ground we plan to cover. So a quick word about how the panels are structured. First, each panel is structured around a concept that is illustrated by two or more examples of proposals that implement the concept. The purpose is not to endorse or recommend any particular proposal, but to use each proposal as a jumping-off point to see how the concept might be implemented in practice. Second, the proposals do not include mandates. We have limited ourselves to solutions that could be implemented within the voluntary retirement system. We think voluntary solutions can be adopted much more quickly, and in general, we prefer ideas that are persuasive on their own terms because they simply work better. Third, we do not intend to supplant or critique existing retirement plans and arrangements, especially traditional defined benefit plans and 401k plans. Rather, our purpose is to expand the options available to us to solve retirement problems so we don't take on the challenges we face with a toolkit that's half empty. So sit back and prepare to enjoy the ride. We hope you'll find it worth taking. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Good morning, everybody. I'm Karen Friedman, for those of you who don't know. On behalf of the Pension Rights Center, I am very excited also to be taking this ride with you. And I see by the turnout today that this is actually turning into a pretty sexy issue, right? Because everybody's turning up at 9 o'clock in the morning for a big pension conference. I want to concur that this is not your father's pension conference, or your mother's for that matter, maybe not even your sister's. Because as Richard said, we're forming an unusual alliance today to try to come up with new forms of retirement plans that will appeal to employers and also do well by employees, retirees, and their families who either don't have plans or who have inadequate coverage. When Richard and the rest of the Covington team came to us to say, hey, would you like to do this conference? We said, wow, that's great. And that was, of course, after thinking, Covington and the Pension Rights Center? Now that is strange bedfellows. But as Richard said, I didn't realize how much fun this would be. And honestly, I learned how much common ground we found with Covington and, of course, the Urban Institute. And many of those ideas were shared at 2 o'clock in the morning in email exchanges. So why is the Pension Rights Center committed to this process? Because reimagining pensions is an extension of what the center has been doing for the last 12 years, coming up with retirement solutions that make sense. From 2000 to 2007, as many of you here know, we convened the Conversation on Coverage, which was a common ground dialogue that developed proposals to increase pensions and savings ideas for low and moderate wage earners. In fact, one of those proposals is a direct outgrowth of the process that we are going to be introducing today, and it's going to be presented by Judy Mazow. Today's event is also compatible with Retirement USA, which is our most recent initiative to bring together worker-oriented groups to find ways of developing a pension system on top of Social Security that's universal, secure, and adequate. Today's conference we're looking at as a middle ground between these initiatives. It's a common ground endeavor to find new solutions that may not be universal, but that try to achieve some measure of security and adequacy for employees and retirees, and that's a very, very good start. As Richard said, we want to focus on ideas that go further than many conferences in the city, marrying the best features of old-fashioned pension plans with the portability and simplicity of 401k plans and new pension designs. Today, you're going to hear a range of proposals, some new, some old, and some recently designed just for this conference. I want to reiterate a couple things. We want to keep this process positive and constructive. So we're asking everybody here to put on your thinking caps and work with us to find out what you like about these proposals and what you think can help make them better. And we want this to be a very give and take process. And before I turn this over to Jean, I want to make a few points about what the conference is and what it's not. As Richard said, this is a conference aimed at creative private sector retirement solutions. We are not discussing public sector plans, although you will hear one creative proposal today that uses state retirement systems to advance solutions for private sector workers. Also, as you'll hear today, although one set of proposals uses the existing framework of Social Security to provide greater annuity protections, this is not a conference on Social Security. This conference is about finding new pension solutions, and we're not debating statistics here. We're not citing eye-glazing sections of the Internal Revenue Code, and if we hear any jargon from the presenters, the respondents, or the audience, we're going to give you the hook. So we want to keep this in plain English. So our hope is that what we're starting today continues into the future. We hope that business, labor, consumer groups, and think tanks could work together to solve problems that we all recognize in our imperfect retirement system. We hope what you hear today will get your creative juices flowing and lead to some possible action for change. So here is Gene Sturley, our other partner in crime.
Well, thank you, and I too am very delighted to have been working with Pension Rights Center in Covington and Burling on this. It's been a delightful enterprise and joint effort. And you know, sometimes you read things and they don't quite come out as they're advertised. It depends on how you interpret the words. I'm reminded of some announcements in church bulletins. You know, one of them announced that their missionary, Bertha Belch, had arrived from Asia, and the bulletin announcement said, please come early and hear Bertha Belch all the way from Asia. There was another one that said, please put your contribution in the collection basket along with the person you'd like remembered. And then there was one that said, you know, our youth will be performing Hamlet in the basement tonight. Come early and watch this tragedy unfold. So I hope that you haven't had any false advertising on this event, but I hope we actually do surprise you a little bit because what we're after in this conference was a little different than a lot, is not so much that you be behind my plan or somebody else's plan or something else, but that you find the common elements in these that really stretch across all plans, that really, where I think we can work. I mean, part of this I think of in terms of finance literature that talks about diversifiable and non-diversifiable risk. In that literature, there's this notion there's some risk you really can reduce if you just organize it right. So, for instance, I think it's possible with a little bit of tinkering to actually produce a lot of reduce inflation risk. I think it's possible actually even to have some risk that are shared across generations a bit. Some people talk about that in an employer-employee context, which I think is a little misleading. I think some of it is whether you can figure out ways to design plans that some market risks aren't borne entirely by somebody who happens to annuitize this one date and not another date. And those are the types of things we want to find in common at the end of the day across plans, things that would unite a good portion, not necessarily all, but a good portion of people in the retirement community. Finally, let me just indicate the reason why I'm involved and why I care so much about this. I work in a lot of areas of public policy. I work on welfare, and I work on Social Security, and I work on taxes and child accounts, and you name it. And the one thing about pensions, and if you want Social Security, although we're not going to do major Social Security reform today, is, you know, sometimes just a minor adjustment can mean tens or hundreds of billions of dollars shifted in the right way or given the right protections to people. You know, it's private pensions are a multi-trillion dollar industry, and some even good changes here can just make vast differences. And when I look at the data, I mean, let's be fair about it. Given all the demographic changes that are going on, given all the budget pressures, and you look at the data, 75% of people go into retirement with more in the way of Social Security and Medicare, I'm counting Medicare as an asset, than all of their private assets, And if you take the bottom half of the income distribution or the wealth distribution, their housing is actually more important than their private pensions. So it's not atypical for a median household to go into retirement with, say, $100,000 of private pension coverage. And by the way, for a couple retiring at 62, one or other of them is liable to live to 90, 28 years. $100,000 or so is going to carry them very far. It's not going to get them very far. So I am one of the people who believe, and it's not on the agenda, that private pension reform has to start becoming, if not today, very soon, part of our major policy agenda related to the budget, related to taxes, related to Social Security, whatever else you want. The private pension reform, real private pension reform, is not yet fully on the table. And a lot of the pension reforms we deal with, I think so far in recent years, and I'm not trying to be critical, a lot of them, have been tinkering around the edges, doing little bits and pieces here. But if you look at the data that we look at all the time at the Urban Institute, at the end of the day, most people go into retirement with very little in the way of protection. And so these adequacy and coverage and risk reduction factors are things I really care about, and we hope that we can really advance the ball on these today as well. So without further ado, I don't want to hold you up any further. I hope you, as I say, I hope we tweak you a little bit this conference and have you think a little bit outside the box that maybe we all tend to get boxed into. Thank you so much.